Welcome to the Refurbishment Mastery podcast with me, Martin Rapley. If you're a property investor who is worried about paying too much for your next property, concerned that you don't know how to manage a refurb, or scared that you will be ripped off by a builder, then this is for you. In this podcast, I share over 30 years of experience of managing refurbishments and conversions to help you make more profit, save your time, and ultimately enjoy the process. On with the podcast. Hi guys, welcome back to this episode of the Refurbishment Mastery podcast, where I'm delighted to introduce you to a very, very good friend of mine and someone I've known through property investing now since 2013. I'm really pleased to be joined on this episode by Dan Norman, a Midlands-based property investor that I originally met through Property Investors Network. The two of us met through Simon Zutshi's Mastermind program back in 2013. And I'm not sure at the time that we spoke a great deal. There's 60 odd people in the room, so you can't speak to everyone. But over the time, we met up at many other PIN events. And more recently, we've been reconnected through Property Entrepreneur, where we are both members of the advanced program there. There's other bits in the middle I could tell you about the support Dan's given to me over the years, and in return there's some support that I've given to Dan over the years. But I've invited him along to talk to us about his experience of managing projects, not necessarily the same experience as mine, and how he's built some of his portfolio, and then some of what he's doing now. So, handing over to you, Dan, for a bit of an overview, and I'll jump in and we'll have a bit of a chat about some of the things you've been doing. So, thanks very much for joining me.
Beautiful. Well, thank you ever so much, Martin. And it brings back some fabulous memories of we were on Mastermind 13 together, weren't we?
That's right.
Which was obviously the best of the Mastermind years, despite...
Of course, yeah, still is.
Yeah, 37, 13 is definitely the best. And part of the PIN network. But what was interesting when we got to know each other was we'd both had an experience, and very different experiences in properties. In property, you had much more of a kind of a formal education in project management, whereas I'd kind of done it by learning by mistakes and failure, and a couple of successes along the way. So I'm very grateful to be invited along to share that story, which may or may not be applicable. And some of the educators have always said, Dan, why are you out not on the tools? Because I'm not a tradesperson. I am an investor. I'm a landlord. I've had multiple businesses, both in property and the licensed trade, but I've not had a kind of a formal or regular route into property. It all started off as a bit of a lark, which is very, very different from your I can't remember what your first project was, but it was quite a serious project, your first project, wasn't it? Whereas mine was a 3-bedroom 92-year-old person's probate sale in Birmingham. So it can't be more chalk and cheese. So I hope I bring some value in addition to what you bring on the podcast from your technical capabilities. Hopefully share a few failures, a few successes, and a few learnings for the listeners.
That's it. I'm sure there's loads of learnings in there, and this is the difference really, because you got into this through being an investor and buying investment type properties, whereas I got into this and where I am now by working for a building contracting business. And as a result, the first principal project I did was building 24 luxury apartments. Now, I would never say to anyone, oh, you're a new property investor, crack on with your 24 luxury apartments. I think the build cost of that project at the time was somewhere in the region of 3 million. Now, that was 40 years ago. So if you perm that up now, you get an idea as to what the build cost was, leave alone the full development cost, including the site and the demolition and everything else that went on. So yeah, you've started from the position where a lot of my listeners are actually starting from, buying a rundown property, probate or whatever else, and picking out from there. So yeah, tell us how you got started.
Yeah, sure. So back in the days when you kind of came out of university with a few quid on your hip, and I always worked through the holidays at uni. So I came out with a little bit of a deposit. I bought a property at the back end of the University of Birmingham, which was 53,000 quid, knocked down from 60, and I moved in my fabulous, smelly university mates. Basically, five of us were living in there, and it was a lot of fun. And we kind of refurbed it, not the electrics or the gas, but we refurbed it as we were going, because part of the deal was if you pay, I'll pay for whatever you do, and a couple of them were quite handy. So we put it into a what was at the time an HMO, and it was a bit, like I say, a bit of a lark, a bit of a jaunt. We were living in it while it was being done. So one day I came home quite calmly, and they'd ripped out the bathroom because, like I say, one of the guys was quite handy and could read tile and read plumb and so forth. But that led to I've always had a love of property. Always knew I was going to buy my own properties as investment. And funnily enough, that property 4 years later, we had to put an extension on for a lounge because we didn't have a lounge at the time. Yeah, it was pretty basic stuff. But we'll come back to that particular piece. And I bumped into a chap who was buying, refurbing, and either renting or selling properties around the West Midlands, B31, B45, Southwest Birmingham, Longbridge, Northfield, Rubery. And ironically, that's one of the companies that I now run. We only do property in those areas. And we smashed through, I think it was about 30, 40 concrete construction refurbs. Like I say, as a bit of a, I call it a jobby, bit of a job, bit of a hobby, alongside my work in the nightclub industry. Because I had a promotions company up until 2, 3 years back, which provided some of the cash. So we could go out and cash purchase and refurb. We did a bit of bank lending as well, but at the time you were only getting 60% on a refurb project. So a lot of the time, either the refurb cost or the purchase was cash because of the conditions of the properties. And we do very basic mag and lamb, glam and lamb, as we call it, magnolia makeovers, pretty basic stuff. But it was turned around, and then I held a few of those. I had a reasonable portfolio by the age of 30. I think I've got about 10 or a dozen properties, mostly single lets, but a couple of HMOs, which rented out at a very basic standard, 500, £550 per property for a single let. And I don't know, it was like 40, 50 quid a room for an HMO at the time, which you wouldn't hear of now. And that took me up to about 2013 when I went on Mastermind. Zutshi, who I've been pals with from back in the university days, finally linked into the fact that there were easier ways of buying and refurbishing properties by having other people to do it along with me and my modest team. And that got into other strategies. So I'd actually bought a little bit of commercial back in 2001, but there was a focus on, okay, what can we buy in that mastermind year? I think we did 9 projects, which almost killed me in all honesty. So learning to phase projects, not trying to do everything over ego and trying to do 5 at one time, which was just insane. And at the time we had 13 blokes working for us. And we were dropping people literally from site to site because you were just you were managing by mayhem rather than by program. And the finance costs were through the roof because we never really kind of got anything completed on what were fairly chunky sites. And that year escalated from, like I say, single lets and a few HMOs. We'd converted a doctor's surgery that was 3-bedroom HMO and 3 studios, an 11 studio conversion, an 8 studio conversion. We split a house into 2. I mean, it was just like everything all at once. So that was a bit of a trial by fire. Spent the next couple of years putting that all back together and also picking up other properties as you do.
Yeah.
And while at that time I had a new business partner, very, very capable in running the teams, there was just a chaos from the fact we were trying to do too much all at once. Things consolidated out of that. We also launched a new project, New Leaf Living, which I'm very fortunate to have met 2 people off Mastermind who we had very shared values and very different skills. So that really worked out because we didn't want to be more landlords, or correction, they didn't want to be. I was quite happy to keep on going, bashing buildings about. But we did want to have a bit of a social conscience, and that project now, New Leaf Living Limited, accounts for, I think we've just breached, well, it's well in excess of 1/3 of 1 million of bed nights for people who don't have their own homes.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we outsource all of the support, the tenancy and so forth for supported housing. That's been running about 13 years. It's 100 and something rooms over 12, 13 different properties. And that was very much done on a cookie cutter approach. So less chaos, more 6 months of working out what are we actually going to do, what are we going to invest in, who is our end user, not buying a property unless we had a lease in principle, and getting that to people who are providing the support and the tenancy and the agency to it. So we didn't have to be involved in that. We just needed to find some great projects that kept people warm, safe and dry.
Yeah. So really interesting that you had a market, you knew what you were aiming to create.
Yeah,
So I guess they gave you the specification of their requirements as far as room sizes, amenity space, quality and condition and what have you. And then
yeah.
you literally went out and sourced the right properties to achieve those goals. And you said there were three of you with different skills. You obviously brought the construction skills to that team.
Yeah, yeah. The property refurb was under my auspice, whereas the other two gents looked after whether it's a finance and lease and the detail. It's the old thing of drive, detail, delivery.
Mm.
So one chap looked after that kind of technical aspects of lease, finance, etc. So I didn't have to even think about it or concentrate on it. The other chap brought the relationships and the marketing and the monitoring of the housing association, which again is something not particularly, that's not particularly exciting to me.
Yeah.
People often say, Dan, you're too much in the trenches, you're too much with the team, but that's kind of what I enjoy.
Mm.
And we're very, very fortunate to be in a situation where we don't got to do it, we get to do it. And that was one
Yeah.
of the other cornerstones of New Leaf Living, was the fact that we wanted to bring our own skill sets, and it didn't have to seem like work. Whereas I think a lot of the time, and especially when you get started off and you're sat doing, I don't know, bad example, but my example would be doing spreadsheets and accounts at 11 o'clock at night because you've come off site and you've had to worry about a finance application and a remortgage. that gets more tricky.
Yeah.
Off the back of that piece, that's all been running. We're now in we're coming up to our third evolution of 6 and 7 year leases on those projects. Very,
Right.
very locked in with the housing association. Had to kiss a couple of frogs
Yeah.
to get to that particular housing association we work with now as a provider. And it's important sometimes to almost do that, so you appreciate quite how good it can be and how it's never hands off. It's never passive income, but it's a lot less active. And as such, we make sure that they're sustainable by giving them a lower market value rent.
Yeah. Brilliant.
In the last 5, 6 years, I've formalised what I was doing anyway with Rover Homes. So that is a concentration on single lets and professional lets in southwest Birmingham. Like I say, 2 postcodes are really where we focus our effort, and we focus on those purely because you get known. People think it's a lot bigger business than it is, and that's really handy because people come and say to you, "Oh, yeah, I saw your property on Rightmove, and I knew it was one of yours because we know it's your spec, it's your colours, it's your tiles, it's your presentation. You take pets, it's B31, so on and so on and so forth." So that's real useful from a business clarity point of view. One of the granular details that always makes me laugh it's still to a degree, is you're thinking about, oh God, if I've got to do maintenance, or my team has to do maintenance, or the letting agency has to do maintenance, if you've painted 50 different properties in 10 different colours, what is the piece that you make it easy for them?
Yeah.
And simplicity, now I'm getting a little bit older, simplicity is the absolute key. We
Yeah.
rounded that Rover Homes off. I've got to take my hat off to Dan and Adam and Josh and all the team at Property Entrepreneur, because the Rover Homes branding, even though we've been doing it since 2001, the Rover Homes branding only really came out in 2019.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I saw you hit the socials with Rover Homes, and I guessed immediately that the Rover was a hint towards the fact that it was pet friendly, and
100%.
certainly seeing your branding and what that's done, and I would encourage anyone listening to think about branding. if you came into my properties, they wouldn't necessarily look like Dan's properties, but we are now getting tenants that saying, "Oh, I've seen a room like that available before in this property. Was that yours as well?" Because it is our style. And the significant thing is, if everything is the same style, then when something breaks, you know what it is. When something needs repainting, you've only got three different colours you use.
Yeah.
The carpet's the same everywhere, and it becomes that much easier to manage in the longer term. So yeah, so much to be said for branding and replicating what works, really.
100%. It's a fool's errand if you're going and buying the last sale item, end of stock at B&Q. You're
Yeah,
just setting yourself up for an absolute nightmare.
yeah, absolutely. And I worked with a client many years ago as a developer, and he just never knew what was in any of his properties that he'd retained, because every time he tried to do a deal and get the last thing of everything, and he got deals here, there, and everywhere, but then the ongoing maintenance of his properties was a nightmare.
Mm.
And in fact, when I worked with him, a lot of the time we were just trying to replace things with products that were available on the shelf and were still going to be available on the shelf in 10 years' time, because we don't need to reinvent a toilet to something fancy. It just needs to do the job.
It's so very true. The other kind of secondary or even tertiary benefit of it is, I think when people see that you've paid attention, there's an increase in trust.
Mm.
And trust is such an important currency. I think it's more important than the amount of money people do or don't have to pay, or the deposit. If they see that you've paid attention and you're caring about what they do, as standard now, we put CCTV on our pieces, whether it's commercial, whether it's resi, whether it, external lighting. It doesn't cost a lot, especially if you're in the middle of a refurb project, or even
Yeah.
indeed some that aren't. We've just put a parking wardenship on the back of one of the larger pieces. I'll discuss that in a moment, because there's actually been a bit of an evolution in Rover Homes. You do tweak a little bit, and it can be as ridiculous as using a larger tile. We were going with metro tiles, which look beautiful, but you can save yourself 2 days worth of labour and mucking about and cost
Yes.
by using a 600 by 300 tile. It's
Yeah.
quicker, it's easier. Or shower panels. Shower panels are obviously a great route if you want that cleanability. There's a
Yeah.
bit of an argument of cleanliness versus aesthetics.
Yeah, I tend to go shower boards, but I would agree with you. If you look at my portfolio, you'll see how things evolved.
Mm,
And in fact, we've just agreed a sale on one of our properties, which is out of area and left from the area we used to invest in,
sure.
all to try and get everything back into a small area again. And if as I look at that property, which we've owned or had control of since 2014, first got that on a lease option, and
Classic.
I look at some of the work we did in the early bedrooms and that is definitely a property that has got three evolutions in it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
where we got that to is now what we do as standard in the newer ones that we're picking up now, because we've kind of worked out over the years what works and what doesn't work. But you're absolutely right about the tenants, the discerning tenants that we want living in our properties are selecting some of their properties based on the fact that it looks nice, it's well presented. If
Yep.
it looks nice, it's well presented, the likelihood is if something breaks, the landlord's going to come and fix it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
The likelihood is things aren't going to break in the first place because it's probably been built to a higher standard in the first place. And one of the very early podcasts I did in this series was me talking through some properties that I'd been viewing with a view of renting for myself,
Right.
and how we went to a property that had clearly been repainted, although I think he'd probably repainted a lot of it with the mop, because it wasn't the highest quality. And the more you looked at it, the more you thought, this is all just going to fall apart. We're going to be living in this and it's going to fall apart. And that's why the rent's so low. And they're the tenants that we don't want to be working with. So you're absolutely right. Deliver a good quality standard of property. You will get the right tenants, they'll look after it, and you'll get known for delivering that.
100%. There's one of the chaps actually on the Mastermind Next Level, the Mastermind graduate program.
Yeah.
His question is, would I want my son to live here? Would I feel that's
brilliant.
If you can't ask it for yourself, ask it for someone else that you actually care about. Because that's it. That's the acid test. And those evolutions are dependent on the specific building, and I'll come into that a little bit if I may. So the most recent block we bought, our mission in Rover Homes was to go out and do another 15 single lets. Sadly, in we smashed through 5 or 6 of the existing, putting them onto our new 72 pages now, I think, the spec document for a Rover home, which sounds ridiculous, but we go through to the point of, this is the type of door handle, this is the type of hinge, this is the paint code. It's literally down to that detail, because I want to have a business that is a business that I can hand the document on, rather than someone having to go back and say, oh, well, that looks like misty morning grey, or is it light elephant trunk?
Yeah.
Because they don't mix so good when you put one on top of the other.
No.
And you don't want to repaint a whole wall. So those specifications become so very, very important as part of the process. Now, if you're only going to go and buy one house, fine, don't bother. But if you're going to upscale and go into a more strategic and intelligent process where you're doing 5, 10, 15 of these, then you want it to be tweaked as much as possible to minimize your effort and time. The one curveball that did come out of this is when single lets in B31 got to the point where we were struggling to actually get hold of them for the amount that we needed to then do the £30,000, £35,000 refit to get them into the standards and then achieve the rents we were looking to achieve. And also there is a ceiling, and people say that the rents are going to keep on going up and up and up and up. But my opinion is, if you're hitting 1,250 to 1,300 for a standard 2-3 bedroom family home, and you've got 1.5 average income earners in that property, that's probably where you're going to be if you want that to be sustainable. Yeah, my personal opinion. Interestingly, next door to one of my 2-3 bedroom terrace places, this lump came up, as the nicest way I could put it, which was 8 self-contained flats divided between 3 properties, and a block of commercial on the side. It went into auction, and at the time stuff was going for 20-25% over auction. I couldn't make it snack on that. It went into auction, didn't sell. Because the agents were not able to gain access. And funnily enough, I got a phone call from my tenant. I think you've heard the Monopoly deal presentation, haven't you?
I have, yes. Yeah.
And she in the nicest way, bawled down the phone saying, you can't give them access over my back garden. I've got a contract with you. I work for the Solicitors Regulation Authority. You're in breach, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, well, hello, Gemma, we'll use a random name. What actually are you talking about? What's the problem here? And what had happened was, because it hadn't sold in auction, terrace houses used to historically have an access across the back. Yeah. Because of that one alley that served 3, 4, 5, 6 properties. And this owner had come around and said, oh yeah, we need to get access back across the back, and you've got a fence in the way. So I called him up. Funnily enough, his name was already in my phone from 15 years ago, back when we were refurbishing one of my HMOs in Selly and I called him up and said, look, what's going on with this? Tell me the story. And we managed to reconnect. Hilariously, him and his business partner both live no more than 1,000 meters from me over in Barnt Green, which is just hilarious for a start. And we reconnected, and we basically did a deal.
Yeah, brilliant.
Poor condition, needed refurb. Top tip is, don't try and refurb properties on that scale when you've got tenants living in, and try and Rubik's Cube them to get them moved from place to place. We basically needed to get in there and get everything done. So should have bought it with vacant possession. That's outside of the fact that it's a bit painful moving folk in and out when they've been solidly in there for, I think one of them have been 13 years. But we've got control of the property. We've now got it's near enough, I think it's pretty much 100% uplift on the rent. Because,
lovely. Well done.
Equally, they were very low rented before. If you can rent a 1 bedroom flat for 350 quid, including the gas, and you're doing okay. But we're in the best of shape. So a refurb of all of those. We've now CCTV there, put lighting outside, put parking control, because at sometimes in a 7-bay parking area out back, there were 14 cars.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
like a Chinese puzzle of moving cars around, and you're not going to get the tenants you want. Our most recent tenants, we've had 4 doctors, 1 surgeon, managers from Mondelez, so it's an uplift. But the best thing is when the local folk in the other properties come by and say to the team who are working on the front, it's lovely to see someone doing work on this. And
Yeah.
it's upgraded that whole area. The locals are happy, but the real cream on the cake was they also wanted to sell the commercial piece next door. So we've got hold of that now. We've got control of that and actually purchased it, because I tend to do creative deals where it's landlords who have portfolios. They understand it a lot better. So those were on for exchange with delayed completions. It's a bit of a strange one. It's 6 commercial units, 8 flats over 4 titles.
Right. Yeah. They're the best deals, though, aren't they? Because they're the ones that don't sell. They're mixed up. There's lack of clarity in them. And yeah, I would say most of what I've picked up has not been straightforward titles. Few things have, but not everything,
Yeah.
because that's where the deals are.
Well, the really interesting piece about those 8 flats in 3 buildings is they provide the same level of rent that would have cost me twice as much if I was doing single lets.
Right, yeah. So effectively, you've got a kind of HMO on steroids here, because you've
Yeah,
got self-contained flats, but in a semi-HMO environment, because they're all in the same block. And
yeah,
I
absolutely.
think, buying blocks of flats is definitely where I'm heading to. The last thing I bought was well, half a block of flats. I bought the freehold and 2 of the 4 flats, but we're talking to at least one of the other owners about buying them out. So that will be that's but yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Buying blocks of flats going forward, a lot less hassle than an HMO, a lot easier to manage than an HMO. And whilst may not get quite the income that you'd get from an HMO, there's an element of time saving that goes with it in return. So it's worth what it is. And you've got tenants for the commercial properties as well now, have you?
Well, that was actually fully let when I went in there. We've had to juggle around with a couple of things because unfortunately that hadn't been touched. So there's compliance regulation that we've
Right,
had to
yeah.
put in play and backtrack on in a way. There was a very random, like 1-bedroom flat at the back of this commercial piece that was kind of built over a fire exit, and he's just like, guys, okay, come on, let's put this into good order. So you have to go into these things with wide open eyes.
Yeah.
It's just occurred to me something I need to jump back to as well about our relationship. I'll get back to that in a moment. So that's been quite an exciting project. There's a development piece in the back. Development is a whole different bag of fish, and that's a long and painful process. I'm much more a refurb guy, and while I've learned my skills over 28 years now. You mentioned that we'd had a bit of relationship and back and forth, and I'm so very grateful for the mentoring that you gave when I was massively out of my comfort zone on my personal property. I'm sorry to jump around a little bit, but that was I think a big eye-opening piece for me, that you can go in and you can get electricians in, and you might have a good gang of trusted plumber, trusted sparky, trusted roofer, strip out team, carpenters, plasterers, etc., etc., etc. But it's when you stumble across those things, and it was very specifically the drainage and the whole programming piece. When you step out of the comfort zone of, I don't know, regular HMO conversions, some of the things I've done before were quite big. We did 6 flats in Worcester, we've done a 5,000 square foot pub and all the rest of it. But it's when you jump into something that you think, okay, I am out of my depth here. And where money can get sucked up, obviously finances is a big piece. Not being able to rent a property because it's not completed is a massive cost that people don't often consider. But the intrinsic programming of, if you've got excavations to do here and wall footings to do there and driveway to do here, having that professional, I probably got you in a little bit late on it, having that professional oversight of, okay, you ideally need to get your plant on site and do it all in one go, just saves fortunes in time and money and energy and brain power and so forth. And that whole programming piece comes in. So I just wanted to backtrack and share my gratitude, Martin, for that.
And I think the thing that the learning here is that you knew how to do everything. What you'd got, what you really benefited from, I think, with me spending an afternoon with you, was someone remotely looking at it from a distance, and putting some structure to it, putting some order and phasing to it, and potentially asking, I would hope, asking you some questions that meant that you were 100% clear what you were trying to achieve, and that what you'd set out to achieve was actually right. Because sadly, I talk to a lot of people that have finished a project and haven't really realised that someone could have come in and given them a better overview, whether that's me or anyone else in property. If they'd have just opened up and discussed it with someone else, they might have said, God, I learned years ago not to do that in an HMO because of, and so that is the advantage of just having some advice. So so pleased that I could help you, and certainly seen some of your posts on social media of where you've taken that property to since. So I mean, it was a grand opportunity when I saw it. Shall we? That's all it was when I saw it.
Yeah, there was a bit of, but it's lovely to have the opportunity as well to take those 19 months sabbatical. And okay, still playing around and do it. I think I did a couple of deals at that time, but at the same time, to when it's personal, it's personal. The challenge comes if it's personal. Your eyes are focused so much on the project overall. When it's business, you can be so in the thick of it that you don't have that helicopter view, which is so essential on a project, I think, unless you're really, really good at getting things structured up. And I know one of our mantras is kind of build twice or even thrice. So you build on paper first. Ideally, then you get someone to have a look at it in case you've dropped out. My thing is always I forget about carpets on a budget. And we all know, I mean, God, the price of everything.
That's not cheap.
Yeah, £4,500 or whatever it might be, and you throw down some LVT as well, and it's your contingency times 3 gone. So the point of it being getting that overview, sense check, sounding board, whatever you might say, is essential if you're going into new ground. Jumping back to the Monopoly project, because that was a bit of a, I think it was one of those projects where the learnings came out at the back end and they were more kind of strategic than they were from a refurb point of view. Strategy first should have been clearing the buildings. Sadly, love the tenants to bits. They're all lovely people. One of them absconded with 5 months rent. Strangely, the one that I thought I was going to have all the grief from just said, if you need me to go, I'll jump out here with my 4 cars. Him and his people were staying in the studio, and they were both taxi drivers. So it was just a matter of the tenants had control on the whole piece. And interestingly, over the last 18 months, the focus has been very much on consolidating on those pieces because they're areas that can have a value add. So the flats have all been done. We know we've had to get through the compliance piece on the commercial action, and also looking at tweaking bits of the building, tweaking the rent after refurb because they have been touched and they're in poor order, and really making those long-term assets work. So I haven't actually really bought anything in the last 18 months.
Just jumping in to make sure that you've got everything you need. Now, in a number of these podcasts, you'll have heard me talk about other property investors that I'm currently working with or have worked with in the past. And so I wanted to ensure that you can find out how you can actually work with me. And the best place to start with that is my website, www.refurbishmentmastery.com. On there, you'll find details of training courses that I run. You'll find details about my community, and also how you can work with me on a one-to-one basis when you are progressed far enough down the line. And then if you're not really sure what's right for you and how we can work together, then there's a button at the top. Just hit the button at the top that says book a call. It's absolutely free. It will take you to my diary, find a slot, and we'll be able to talk in the next couple of weeks. Remember, the website is refurbishmentmastery.com. I really look forward to helping you with a successful delivery of all of your projects. Now back to the podcast.
Because I take a view now, if it's not leaping out at me and ticking all the boxes, then it's something that I need to be a little bit cautious of, I think is the right word. We've got a lot more regulation coming and compliance, so that's why the knife needs to be all the more keen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, particularly for someone like you that's well established and got a portfolio, you're not looking to grow quickly, so you might as well grow with the right things. And when you meet someone in the street that's got something of interest, follow it up. But you don't need to be on Rightmove and Property Filter every day of the week looking for the next deal. I'm the same. Although I would like to grow my portfolio more, I definitely don't want to be in a position where I'm buying rubbish just to get another property over the line. I was probably doing that to some extent 10 years ago. Although I've always been quite cautious and I've always been more aware of the cost of refurbs. So I'd like to think a lot of my budgets were accurate. But I think, unfortunately, we were just saying this before we started recording, I think there are some property investors out there that are probably buying the wrong properties at the wrong price. But it doesn't matter because they're all over social media telling you how they're brilliant because we're into November or October and I've bought 10 properties already this year. So each to their own, really. And totally. I'm not going to knock them because I don't know enough about them. But I think I think there's a learning here for us all that we don't need to go fast and furious because ultimately what really matters for all of us is the value of the equity in the properties or the income that we're getting from it, not how many properties we've actually got. And properties in your part of the country are are more expensive than where I'm investing, but cheaper than where I'm living. And there's people all around the country in that can invest in even cheaper places. So numbers doesn't count for anything. It's got to come down to what's the value and what's your monthly income.
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly, I look back at some of the stuff I was doing back in the Mastermind year, and it was very much a matter of I needed 10 properties. I had like a little printout with 10 properties. It didn't actually have how much. Oh, okay, the value was 2 million quid, and the rent roll was what the rent roll was. But you kind of sit back and look and think, okay, there wasn't actually a rental amount and a profit and a percentage on all of those things. It was very much vanity. We did a load of learning, and okay, a bunch of them are still doing okay, but there's still one of them I'm trying to flick off the table at the moment because it's just been such a long play with it. And it's not meant to be maverick or anything else like that at all, because investors should look to invest and not be on the tools. But a very interesting thing happened the other day at the Monopoly deal. This local chap walked by, a mechanic, and he said, "Oh yeah. You might want to have a look at something because I know a retiring landlord who's selling." Now, if I hadn't have been there operational on the site that I'm probably too operational on anyway, in all honesty, that conversation wouldn't have even begun. Now, it might come to a deal, it might come to nothing. But at the same time, retiring landlord means there's multiple properties and there is a chunk there. May or may not be right. We've yet to discuss fees, terms, costs and all the rest of it. But at the same time, the old paradigm I had of buying 2 and 3 bedroom family homes for 130,000 quid, A, it doesn't exist. B, I'm up against what is a pressurised area of the market at the moment, which is first-time buyer homes, or in our area, stuff under £250,000 and stuff over £1 million is seemingly selling quite well. The stuff in the middle is a little bit choppy. So you kind of have to continually, or not continually, over the last year specifically, and the raising of finance rates, you have to look at what you're doing. And it might be that the road that you go down is more commercially based,
Yeah.
or blocks of flats, or whatever it is. So you need to have. It's almost like you've got your goals set in stone, but your plans in sand. You
Yeah.
might need to maneuver a little bit. Make sure your goals are intelligent for a start. It's not a matter of having 10 properties, because if you've got 10 properties and they're making you 50 quid a month each, what's the point? It's better to have three that are doing you a grand a month each,
Mm.
um, and making them beautiful, deliverable, programmed, and future proofed. So that's kind of side A, if you want. Side B is to know when the deal's the right one to go for, and you go crazy and go all in when you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having that readiness, having that whether it's the education or the finance or the program or the team sometimes. And interestingly, over the last summer, I've been doing projects for a landlord pal of mine. He's simply not got enough blokes. I've still got a modest core team available, and we've landed on and done. God, summer was a total of nine projects, six of which were fairly modest conversions, just giving him a lift in the student area of rooms that actually need to be converted back from being rooms to being communal facilities, so that they expanded and made those properties more saleable.
Yeah.
Three of which are more substantial projects. One was a very quick, I think we spent about 15,000 quid on taking something from basically de-HMOing a property.
Yeah.
So taking the locks off the doors, taking down the signage. We didn't strip out the fire pro just in case, because to put that back in should we need to would have been a hell of a job. Cleaning it up, getting rid of all the crap, a bit of recarpeting, a bit of reflooring and so forth. And that's actually just sold as a family home, which is what it actually should be. It's in a beautiful family home area, and it's better for the landlord to release that equity
Mm.
and use it in other ways, rather than having it chuntering along as what was quite a tired HMO. I think about 2023 years. And it's been full all the time, which is great, but the return isn't there.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
done.
You've got to continually review what you do, and what your model is, what your market is, what your investment area is, and what I'm sure you see and what I see a lot is those tired, run down properties on the market owned by a landlord that really should have got shot of them 10 years ago, and now that, yes, they've got some value on paper because there's tenants there paying rent, but buried deep down when you look at it is that they need £100,000 worth of refurbishment to stop the damn things falling down in the next few years,
Right.
because they've just had nothing done to them for years and years and years. And I'm not intending to become that kind of landlord. I don't want those kinds of properties. That I'll be out long before that.
Mm.
As I said, I've just sold the last property I had in my old investment area, and we moved out of that area because I was running a networking meeting in Kent, and every single month investors turned up from London saying, right, so I've got to invest in Medway. I'm told it's a really good place to invest. There's some really good opportunities in Medway. And I'm thinking, well, that's where I'm investing. If all of you are coming from London, it's time for me to move on.
Right. Interesting.
So I hot-footed it as far away as I could and ended up in Dover. And that's how pretty much how I came to be in investing in Dover. Just before wrapping up, I just wanted to acknowledge another massive help that you gave to me, Dan, with
Oh,
my business, which you will remember this, of course. Well, I had been around property investing circles, mostly doing project management, doing a little bit of training, but mostly project management. And so a good friend of both of ours, someone I knew very well, a guy called Paul Merrison, talked me into running a training course. And he pretty much said to me, look, Martin, I know you don't want to run a training course, but everyone in property needs some training. You've got the skills. He said, what I'll do is I'll book a room in an airport hotel out in Heathrow, and you can come along on a Sunday and deliver some content. And it was like, I don't know if I want to do it, but just for you, Paul, to make you go away, I'll come and do it for you. Anyway, long and short of it is, I loved that day. I had a cracking day. Paul was a cracking guy anyway. He was the life and soul of the party. He hosted the event, and I delivered the content. And what a brilliant event it was. And sadly, well, I came away from that saying I'm going to run some more meetings. I'm going to run some more training courses. Sadly, 3 weeks later, Paul passed away, had a massive heart attack, and my whole what I'd seen was my next career of running training courses kind of fell to pieces because my friend Paul, who'd filled the room and got 30 odd people along to hear my content, was no longer there to help. But it was Dan here who came to me and said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll fill a room in Birmingham for you if you want me to." And then subsequently filled a number of other rooms for me. So thank you very much for that, Dan, because that was a whole thing that could just have fallen to pieces, really. It was you saying, I know loads of property investors up in Birmingham. Why don't you come up to Birmingham and deliver the same content? And that grew to pretty much what the business is now. The content of those early training courses is still in video format.
Yeah.
A lot of people that are in my community still get the access to that in video format, a little bit freshened up, but pretty much the same content. So yeah, really wanted to thank you for that, because we say we've known each other for a long time, since 2013, and it's interesting how paths cross, and then you lose touch, and then you meet again. Like you were saying, you rang the fella, and it turned out his phone number was already in your phone. Yeah, that is where we are. Yeah, don't fall out with anyone on the way up, because you might well meet them on the way down, or
Yeah.
vice versa, whichever way you're going. So yeah, it's
I
yeah,
think Gene
there's
Simmons Chris said that, didn't he?
yeah,
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 it's a quote from Gene Simmons.
yeah,
But I'm sure Paul will be looking down on us and be incredibly proud of what you put together, Martin. Because my one criticism of property education is we put so much stead in the finance or the strategy, which is absolutely important. But the bottom line of it is, if the asset doesn't work, and to kind of bring it full circle, that first property I ever bought, that me and my gang of mates refit, as a student let, it was doing 1,600 quid a month in rent. When we most recently refit it 3 years ago to Rover Home Standard, we actually took the room numbers down from 5 to 4. We
yeah,
on-suited everything. We did it professionally. And it's now pulling the thick end of, I think it's 3,600 quid a month.
yeah.
So
So
if
yeah,
you
do the right work, add the right value.
absolutely correct. And that sadly only comes with either okay, you can watch it on YouTube and you can do whatever else. But I always like to say, I can watch someone run 100 meters in under 10 seconds on YouTube. That doesn't mean I'm going to do it, because I've not got
Yeah,
I've not got the correct food going in. I've not got the goal setting. I've not got the mindset. Blah 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 blah. So it's so essential. I think when we're dealing with property, the stock is the house, that we
yeah,
have the correct information and the correct education. You can do it two ways. My way was not the clever way, because I had to learn through the mistakes and the errors, and sometimes they worked out and sometimes they weren't so good. And especially when you're dealing with the level of compliance and regulation and the stuff that we're seeing coming in now, the professionalisation of it, I think, is all the more important. So more power to your elbow. And I know Paul would be smiling and saying, yeah, keep on swinging the bat.
So I think, yeah, looking back, he was definitely right. There was definitely a need for what I'm talking about, and it doesn't obviously suit everyone. But there's not even now. There's not many people educating and guiding property investors on the refurbishment side of things, and yet, if you get it wrong, you can lose all of that hard work you've put in negotiating a cracking deal at the front end. You can lose all of that with a poor refurbishment. And and testament to you, really, Dan, that you're still here, telling the story that you got in there and not really know what you were doing, but you slowed down, took some advice, worked with Simon and the PIN organization, and and have gone on and built new leaf living with the other two guys. And it's so good to I know who they are as well, and it's so good to see that's taken off. You worked with other people to put your skills alongside them, because you didn't want to be doing compliance, and you didn't want to be just chasing tenant or chasing service providers and things like that. And that this is the evolution of a property investor. I'm just going to buy a rundown property and see if I can make it work. And now you've got a portfolio. You're looking at commercial, toying and tempted by a little bit of development possibly. And this is
braver
this
and
is
better than me.
where you go. Remember, you could get planning on that and sell it.
Well,
That's probably the way.
Yeah, we're not building it out.
No.
Not in a million years. That whole block plan, Martin, just to jump in on it briefly, is to create something that's got enough rental income to keep it washing its face, so the whole piece gets sold.
Yeah,
and
that's it.
Lovely for a small, medium developer, but it's for better, brighter, and braver than me.
That's it. Yeah, know what you want to do, what you want to achieve. And stop there. And that, of course, that brings us full circle to property entrepreneur that we're both on now. Is what is your own life by design? You don't need to be competing with anyone else. It's just what's right for you. Pick your niche, be really good at it, and rinse and repeat. Don't feel that you need to do bigger projects, more glorious projects. Don't do new build if you want to do refurbishment. Don't do HMOs if you want to do single let flats. Work out what's right for you, and stick with it. And as always, from a refurbishment perspective, I'm obviously here to help and guide and support for anyone who was enthused to get into refurbishment from anything Dan was talking about there. But of course, I'm sure most people are looking at adding some value to their properties in one way or another. So thank you very much for joining me today, Dan. Which is the best way for people to get hold of you? I'll put this in the show notes as well, but if you can, for anyone listening, what's the best way?
So couple of variations. I tend to deal primarily through email because I don't remember things so well. My main property company is Rover Homes, so it's dan@roverhomes.co.uk. But as I mentioned, my summertime project is for a local landlord. I'm a bit of a gun for hire at the moment. So very specifically helping one of the other chaps on Property Entrepreneur who's got a very important mission, which is for Black Box. Which is a conglomeration of all the things that no one wants to talk about. I say this chuckling because you always have to laugh when you're saying it. Death and wills and power of attorneys and intents and wishes. And Akash is he's really grasped that thorny nettle that so many people don't discuss. And especially folk who are involved in the property game, a lot of things are still sadly done on a scrap of a bit of paper or a handshake or whatever else. So my contact details on that are dan@the-black-box.uk. And we're very happy to help people out, even if it's just for 30 minutes to discuss where their gaps might be. Because as you mentioned with Paul sadly passed away. I've had a couple of very good friends in the nightclub game sadly pass away a lot earlier than they should have. So there's no point in doing all this work if we've not got it protected.
No, and sadly, Paul didn't have any legacy planning at all when he passed away. His wife inherited a bit of a nightmare. Everything was in his name. It hadn't been structured at all because he was only 44 and he was invincible at 44, as we all were or all aim to be. But sadly, his wife, and I saw the back end of that, the heartache. So without any doubt, I know what Akash is doing with the Black Box, and well worth. In fact, within about 4 months of Paul passing away, the first thing we did was sort out all of our legacy planning because we'd just seen the nightmare that it ended up as a result. So even if you don't get anything about refurbishment from this, guys, do think about your legacy planning. Do get in touch with Dan if there's anything there that sparks interest with you. And otherwise, I look forward to catching up with you on another podcast very, very soon.
Thank you for having me, and I hope that's been a help.
Cheers. Thanks. Thanks, Dan.
All the best. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Please do like, share, and leave a comment where you can. If you need any guidance or advice with anything to do with your refurbishments or conversions, then don't hesitate to reach out. You can book a free call with me by clicking on the link at the top of my website, refurbishmentmastery.com. There's other ways you can contact me in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.